Now, despite those tensions, President Peña Nieto announced another proposal that would bring in more taxes by placing levies on sugary drinks and on capital gains income. Earlier, I spoke with Duncan Wood, director of the Mexico Institute at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. We discussed some of the changes going on in the country.
Well, there's two distinct groups that are on the streets of Mexico City right now. There are those who represent the teachers, and it's an extreme faction of the teachers' union, the CNTE, and they're protesting the reform which has already been passed in Mexico, which really opens up the teachers' union, exposes it to evaluation by the government for the first time in its history, and addresses a number of other issues which are fundamentally problematical about the way that education is structured in Mexico. And those guys have been on the streets for a couple of weeks now. The second group which is gathering there right now is a group which is convened by Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who is the firebrand leader of the extreme left in Mexico. And they're there to protest, first of all, the energy reform which is being proposed by the government. They are protesting the fact that the national oil company Pemex is going to be reformed and is going to be allowed for the first time to work alongside private and foreign companies.
It's one thing to have demonstrations on the streets. Do these groups have any political clout to change things?
It's interesting. I mean, the news reports that we see coming out of Mexico City and the conversations that I have on a daily basis with folks down there say that Mexico City is becoming unlivable because of this. But that doesn't necessarily translate into legislative impact. What the folks who are running the energy reform protests right now are hoping to do is to express the public's discontent with the government's program. They recognize that they probably cannot stop the reform in the short term, although the left-wing parties in Mexico have promised that they will hold a referendum on the issue in 2015 with an eye to revoking what the energy reform will put in place.
What is their justification for pushing all this through?
Well, their justification for it is that Mexico needs it, and the truth is that Mexico does need it. Mexico needs to be opened up to higher levels of competition. It needs to be modernized in both of these sectors, in education and in energy, because the economy, although that it holds enormous potential, is underperforming. And we've seen that in the first 6 months of this year. Very, very disappointing growth rates. But if these reforms begin to take effect, and if Mexico continues to move in the right direction, then we should expect much higher rates of growth from the country in 2014, 2015.
But they're obviously having difficulty selling that message.
Yeah, I mean, public opinion on energy is still firmly against the government's reform program. Around 60% of Mexicans believe that things should stay more or less the way they are right now.
What about broad public opinion in Mexico? Any indication of which way that swings?
Right, so broad public opinion in Mexico generally recognizes that Mexico needs to change. It recognizes that for the last 12 years, the previous government, the PAN government of Felipe Calderón and Vicente Fox before him, was unable to achieve the legislative reforms that were needed by the country to move it forward. But there's still a large number of people who believe that some of the government's reforms that are being proposed right now are not what is good for the country.